We thought we were creating shoes just for me to run in the Olympics. And as we did a deep dive, into the industry, that's when we really had this learning that shoes are not being made for women. And what that means is a shoe is made off of mold of a foot, and it's the mold of a man's foot to make women's sneakers. And when we learned that, it was like, okay, we are where we're supposed to be.
What's going on, Essence family? It's your girl, Sheree Nicole, here again with another edition of Essence Black Women in Sports. I've been fanning out for the last 5 minutes, so let me calm myself, and I will tell you why. Because I get the opportunity to chat with a world-class athlete, the most decorated Olympian in history, with a record, check this, 20 World Championship medals and 11 medals at the Olympic Games, which includes 7 gold medals. But beyond that, she's a super mom. She's an entrepreneur, and she's an advocate for women around the world in sports and beyond. She has a ton of amazing things going on in the sports space, and I'm so grateful to be joined by the track and field icon herself, Allyson Felix. I can't believe I'm saying that. Allyson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that intro.
Absolutely. You are more than deserving, and been keeping up, and you've had some great things happening. You recently rang the NASDAQ bell for your sports management agency, Always Alpha. First of all, I love the name. Secondly, just for you to be able to experience that and all that's encompassed the success of Always Alpha, what say you to how you guys are moving forward?
Yeah, we're so excited. I mean, women's sports is having such momentum right now, and it's long overdue. And at Always Alpha, we get to represent female athletes and just show up for them and celebrate them holistically. And so to be able to think about it for me in a legacy perspective, I've learned so much, and I really want to pass that on.
So speaking of passing things on and moving things forward, and you're a newly elected member of the IOC Athletes Commission, Allyson. And for those who don't know, guys, this is going to give her direct say in Olympic policies, which includes how they support women in sports, which is such a big, obviously, heart, passion project for you, Allyson. So with that said, with this level of power, essentially, that you get and advocacy in the space, what can people expect, and what can you expect from yourself in this position?
Well, I think it's just so important to have a seat at the table. And, I always want to be that representation for other athletes. My goal is to make the road easier and not to have as many barriers. And so I'm going to continue to listen to what our athletes need and how I can fight for them and stand up for them and just push to make things a bit better.
Yeah. And you speak of that fight. And before I kind of get into, what happened with Nike and how that kind of shifted you into the space, before that happened, were you aware that there was a advocate in you for others? Was there a moment in your life when you realized that was the case and the gift you had?
It took a long time for me to get there. I'm the person who I don't like to ruffle feathers, as an athlete. I just really had my head down, and I really focused on what I felt like I was supposed to do, try to win medals and run as fast as I could. And it wasn't until real life circumstances really started to shake things up where I felt like, okay, even though I don't feel comfortable, I need to speak out. And it was definitely an evolution process to get there.
When we think about speaking out, I know some people have different ways of doing it. Some people will go out and feet to the pavement and protest. Some people will post on social media. Some people will get out and get a mic and go for it. For you, what's been, and we'll get more into that as well, but what's been your main vein when it comes to how you advocate?
For now, I use my voice, but it took me time to find my voice that I think we all can do it in our own way, exactly like you said. And sometimes it is within our own circles. It might be, holding certain people accountable. You don't have to have this huge platform to be an advocate. But I have understood that I am in a seat where, I can stand up for other people. And I've really been trying to exercise that muscle to speak out more. And, sometimes you have to call people out, and sometimes it is an uncomfortable space, but I always think about the purpose, and I think about my own children and just trying to make things better for those who are coming behind me.
Yeah, heavy is the cape and the crown a lot of times for people who do the work that you do. So, I know your mom, there's a lot of other things going on. You're an entrepreneur. How do you kind of handle that load of looking out for other people, but also making sure that you're still giving things back to yourself and also to your family?
I mean, it's hard. I think it's hard for anyone who's juggling a lot of things. And I have a great support system. And so I know that I don't do any of this alone. And that really is helpful to me. And then I know that I have to fill my own cup. I won't be helpful to anybody if I don't do that. And sometimes it looks like actually scheduling something on my calendar, or, sitting in the car for a few minutes before I head into the house, or, whatever it might look like at that, stage of life. But it is so important to make that time.
I'm a car sitter as well, Allyson. I have to tell you, I get a good 20, 30 minutes in, depending on how my day goes.
Yeah.
I still work out a lot. I'm a former athlete. And for me, I don't feel right if I'm not working out at least 4 to 5 times a week. And I know sometimes it's hard to kind of turn that switch off. And it's like, okay, you're not performing at this level anymore. You obviously want to stay well, but you have to have some boundaries around how you work out, how you move forward in your wellness. For you, have you found that balance? Are you still out there like, I'm going for the gold again? What does that look like for you?
I mean, it's definitely been a transition for sure. And I've had to figure out what works for me. I was doing a workout. It was probably a year ago, and I was really taking myself down on the track. And I kind of looked around and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to be doing this. Nobody. So since that moment, I was I started to do new things. I started to play tennis and just, find ways to push my body in other ways that are different, that are fun. And so I still love, a great challenging workout, but I try to expand, the way that I do them now.
Yeah, speaking of expansion, let's talk about Saysh. So, for those who don't know, Allyson, she had a little run-in with Nike. Wasn't her fault. She just got pregnant, and here we go. But she called them out for cutting her pay during her pregnancy, and rightfully so. And so with that, Saysh was kind of birthed as well. And I love how you channeled that disappointment, that dismissal, and even arguably, in certain respects, that disrespect to then steer your entrepreneurial efforts in this regard. So when Saysh kind of came about, were you sitting in a seat of, okay, I need to do something right now? Was this something you had kind of been thinking about prior to, and then this issue with Nike happened, and then you moved into it? How did the birth of Saysh kind of happen?
I felt like I always had the spirit of entrepreneurship, but I wasn't sure how that was going to manifest. And when I went through this situation, it was really just out of necessity. It was in conversation with my brother, who is also my business partner, my manager. And we were just talking okay, what's the next step? And we really looked for another sponsor and couldn't find it out there. And, he had this idea of doing it ourselves. And at first I was like, that feels very big. It just resonated with me. We have the ones with the power to create change instead of asking these massive companies to do so.
When I think about Black women and sometimes how our tone could be misconstrued, but also how the responsibilities of looking out for others kind of just sits on us just innately. Did you kind of war inside with how to approach people with Saysh, the even in your advocacy, the tone of your voice or what you wrote down? Did you ever kind of tussle with that? And if so, how did you kind of find that happy medium?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for Black women, that has been the case for so long, that we can be put into a box. And so for me, it was about turning this negative situation into something positive, and that it was so much bigger than me and what I went through. It was saying that, no, I see all women and I'm going to support them. And I think that, all women should have something specifically made for our bodies, but also it's much larger than that. It's standing with women. And so it's an honor to be able to do that. And I just come back to my purpose and, keep pushing forward in the face of a lot of adversity.
Yeah. Speaking of purpose, what is one thing that you've learned about yourself that you didn't realize as you moved through with Saysh and built this brand?
I think just the ability to pivot, and the ability to do something really scary. I'm from the heart of LA, from the Crenshaw district. I didn't grow up, seeing the people around me, start businesses and do these different things. And so I felt like I really struggled with imposter syndrome of, how can I do this? But I think getting over that hurdle and having great mentors and seeing that, okay, the people who are doing this, I'm capable as well. And that has been probably the biggest surprise and encouragement and thing to get through.
Love it. So I want to move to Always Alpha for a bit. I'm so pro, I'm so pro girl power. I'm so pro Black women in particular. But, again, as you've mentioned, it's about all women, and you make sure that, your advocacy ties in and connects us all, which I absolutely love. And I love Always Alpha as well. So when we think about sports management, and sometimes, again, how females are underrepresented, how they're not represented, how, athletes of your caliber may struggle with even aligning themselves with the right representation simply because they're women and kind of don't know where to go. When it comes to Always Alpha, what are you guys kind of providing in that vein that's helpful to women who may be wanting to be the next Allyson Felix, or who may already be out there on the track or otherwise competing and just don't necessarily have the representation they need?
Absolutely. I think it's really about a deep listening to our athletes and to what they want to accomplish, in the field of play, but off of it as well. I think traditionally, a lot of these large sports agencies, it's kind of like a cookie cutter model. And I really love the boutique approach where it's different for every single person. And we all have passions and interests. And, right now, we can build our brands, create our own content, really celebrate individuals holistically. And that's really what we look to do, and to bring new sponsors in that haven't been in the space of women's sports, and just really build out strategic plans for each person that we work with.
Yeah. What's one thing, kind of a main topic that continues to kind of resurface and ruminate that you guys have kind of heard through Always Alpha from women that you want more people to kind of grab onto and understand? Is there one thing in particular?
I would say probably the biggest thing is not going down the traditional path. We're seeing now more than ever that we're doing things differently. We are not staying in the mold. I look at myself and even, competing in a brand that I owned. There's going to be so much more of that. And I'm so excited, to help and assist athletes to be able to do that. And I think we're seeing that women in sports have such rich personalities. Like there's so much there, away from the field of play as well. And so I think that's it. It's just breaking out of this mold and saying, okay, let's do things differently. Let's have more equity. And let's be, let's celebrate and be unapologetically who we are.
Yeah, I want to shift gears a bit. And I was watching, I think it was an ESPN feature a couple days ago. And there's a professional soccer player. She recently retired. She was like, I think late 30s or perhaps. And she wanted to be a mom. And ultimately she had to go through a very, stressful. We know IVF can be stressful, but she had to go through IVF. And she was saying that she assumed because she was a high level athlete, that motherhood would just happen for her when she was ready. Mm-hmm. So her plan was high level play, retire, boom, baby. And it didn't happen for her that way. And as I was watching her tell her story, I think about, as an athlete, sometimes we get so sold into the fact that our bodies haven't failed us in our particular sport that they may not have challenges later on. So with that being said, what say you to women who are competing at a high level in sports right now, who may want to be mothers, who may not necessarily be doing some of the checks that they need to, the fertility checks or checking in with their doctor just to kind of get a real understanding of their numbers, and who are assuming, oh, it could just happen for me. I'm an athlete. I'll be good. What say you to them?
Yeah, I think we need to really, I think we're doing a disservice to our female athletes. These are conversations that we have to have so early on. And I think it's all about choice. If you choose to be a mother, if you have that desire, or if you don't. But I think the resources we need to offer, whether it's egg retrievals, thinking about these things early on so that we can have the options, because it's heartbreaking to give yourself to your sport for so many number of years. And then when it's time where you really want to lean into family and exploring that, not to have as many opportunities. I went through an IVF journey myself, and I know how challenging that can be. And so I really think that we have to offer more opportunities and also have the conversations much earlier.
Yeah, when we talk about opening up that door of opportunity, when we think about advocacy and even the work that you do, this is advocacy, what you're saying right now. How important is it for you to continue to kind of help stand in the gap or spread that awareness when it comes to women advocating for themselves, for their health, especially if they're mothers, expected mothers, or want to be mothers?
It's huge. I mean, what I have seen is that the systems in place are not made for women athletes to continue through motherhood. It's just not how it was built. And so to have a voice, as you know, as we're trying to change some of these things, and someone to really stand up and say, I've actually lived this, and this is what's helpful, and this is what athletes need. I think it's really crucial. We were able to bring a nursery to the Paris Games, and it was a huge win, to be able to say, and it was also mind blowing that, like, how did this not happen until 2024? But I think that's a great example of saying, okay, I'm going to raise my hand and say, like, I think that this is something that needs to be taking place.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that needs to continue to take place is the success that we're seeing Black women in particular have on the track. I was just enamored by the Paris Games and in track and field and the representation, and it just really made my heart glad. And when you think about your own career and then where we're seeing track and field kind of go with Black women, female athletes in particular, what say you to the growth, but also the challenges that they face outside of motherhood that you'd like to see curbed a bit and help and them get some assistance with?
Yeah, I mean, I share that excitement as you do. We have such a rich history, in track and field, and it's incredible to see that on full display and to see these Black women be celebrated. And then to know that there's still a lot of struggle, and whether that is equal pay or opportunity outside of the Olympic space, it's very competitive, and just being able to assist, as we navigate these challenging times, I guess I would say. And so continuing to push the elevation of these athletes outside of just track and field, and really show the world, what great personalities, what great ambassadors these athletes are.
Yeah, and a lot of times that personality and that ambassadorship kind of ties into financial footing or at least financial opportunities. I was recently attended the Grand Slam Track Miami, and I got a chance to talk to Michael Johnson just about what Grand Slam Track is doing to assist these athletes and getting the exposure and hopefully some of them the brand opportunities. So as someone like yourself who does an incredible job of building her own brand, who's continued to align yourself in a way that brings you a level of finance on and off the track, what say you to the brand building side of the sport? We know there's challenges, but are there some areas where you're encouraged and you hope athletes are encouraged as well?
Yeah, I'm definitely encouraged by our track athletes, what they're doing beyond the field of play. And so I think we're seeing a lot of them really showing their personalities, creating their own content, building brands, and stepping outside of this hat of only being an athlete. And we're really learning about them. And I think that can be the challenging thing about the Olympics, is that for a lot of viewers, they have this 2-week window where they watch you. But if we can expand that, and I think Grand Slam Track and other leagues that are popping up are great examples of that, because it really takes us outside of the Olympic cycle and says, these are the same athletes and this is what they do, in between the Olympic years. And we're getting a glimpse inside of their life. And we really need to lean on that. And I think it is a huge upside that is starting to happen.
Yeah, you're such an anchor, Allyson, and you take it on the chin. You're so humble. For those who don't know, before we got going with this interview, we were fangirling out. One of our amazing editors, Ansonet and myself, were fangirling before we got started, and you were just so gracious and humble. And with that said, I think sometimes we're so great, we don't necessarily sit in it enough to realize how important we are to that next generation. You are vital to this up and coming generation of athletes, not just track and field. Do you feel that sense of vitality? And also, what's the importance for you in making sure that you continue to build bridges, not only with where you are presently, but with those that are coming behind you?
Well, I appreciate that. I received that. I guess for me, there have been people who have paved the way and poured into my life. Jackie Joyner-Kersee has been a mentor, a friend to me since my very beginning. And I think she really just taught me what mentorship looks like and what a true role model is. And so I do my best to be available to all the current athletes, that they can reach out, and if I can assist in any way. And then I do my best to fight for them, behind the scenes as well. And so legacy is so important to me. And I just want to make sure that they have a great path and don't hit some of the barriers that a lot of us have faced before them.
We talk about legacy. It's almost like you led me to my closing question. With that said, when people mention Allyson Felix, the track star, we obviously understand, how iconic you are just from a medals and performance standpoint. But is there one word that you'd love to hear when it comes to just what you've been able to do on the track, and also one word that speaks to what you've been able to do off of it?
I think on the track, I hope, I'm remembered as being fierce, a fierce competitor. And off of the track, I hope that people see that I've really tried to advocate for other women, mothers, and just try to leave things better than I found them.
Yeah, we see you for sure. I want to make sure people can lock arms with you if they want to connect with you, and with all the great work that you're doing. How can they do that?
Yes, you can follow me everywhere at Allyson Felix and at Saysh.com and alwaysalpha.com.
Allyson Felix, it happened. I still can't believe it, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Enjoy your spring/summer, and thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you for having me.